You've been told a lie for so long that it sounds like the truth now. The lie is simple. If you want to cool your house without paying a fortune, you need to buy something expensive: a heat pump, a geothermal system, a smart thermostat, solar panels first, then batteries. The message is always the same: spend thousands, or accept your fate and pay the utility company forever. But there's something the HVAC industry doesn't want you to know. There's a cooling system that's been working underneath American homes since the 1890s. It doesn't advertise, it doesn't require maintenance calls, it doesn't charge monthly service fees. It works because of something free that's already there, waiting directly under your lawn. And the reason nobody talks about it anymore isn't because it stopped working. It's because once you understand how it works, you can build it yourself for less than what most people spend on groceries in a single week. Here's what the engineers know but rarely explain. 6 feet below the surface of your yard, the temperature is nearly constant. Not constant during summer, not constant when the weather is mild. Constant, year-round. Whether it's 98 degrees above ground or 14 degrees, that earth beneath your feet sits at an almost unchanging 54 to 56 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not an opinion, that's geology. The U.S. Geological Survey has been measuring ground temperatures since 1910, and the data is ironclad. At 6 feet down, the seasonal variation is so small it barely registers. This is the same principle that kept root cellars cold for 200 years before electricity existed. This is why caves stay cool in July, and why your basement floor never quite warms up, no matter how much the summer sun beats on your roof. The Earth, you see, is a thermal battery, and it's fully charged. Now, what if I told you that a retired well driller in Mississippi figured this out almost 100 years ago? A man named Horace Tatum, around 1926, he took coils of leftover copper pipe, buried them 4 feet down in his yard, connected them to a water barrel on his porch, and let gravity move water through those buried coils. Nothing was plugged in. There was no motor, no electricity bill. His daughter remembered growing up in the only house in Marshall County where you could sleep in July without sweat soaking through your sheets. The neighbors thought he was crazy. They called it Horace's folly. But when the University of Mississippi came out to measure his cooling loop in 1953, they found air coming off those coils at 58 degrees on a 96-degree afternoon. The man never owned a fan. He never needed one. This should have revolutionized cooling. It should have been in every house built after 1930. Instead, it was forgotten, deliberately forgotten. Or more precisely, buried by an industry that made far more money selling you a compressor, a refrigerant, and a monthly electric bill than selling you the truth about what was already under your feet. Here's what changed. In the 1950s and 1960s, the utility companies realized something crucial. If people could cool their homes passively, using the earth, they'd have no reason to run an air conditioner. And if people didn't run air conditioners during the summer, peak demand would collapse. Electricity sales would plummet. So, quietly, the industry shifted. The Department of Energy published the physics in dry, boring language designed to be read by almost no one. Universities buried the research papers. And the narrative became simple. Passive cooling is old. Active cooling is modern. If you want to be comfortable, you need to depend on the grid. And that narrative worked perfectly. For 60 years, it worked exactly as intended. But you're not dependent on that narrative anymore. If you're watching this, you're done paying for what you should be generating yourself. So let's talk about what's actually happening in your house right now. Your air conditioner is running on a cycle. A compressor works against the laws of thermodynamics to force heat out of your living space. It uses electricity to move refrigerant through a phase change cycle. It's technically brilliant. It's also why your summer electric bill looks like a payment towards someone's vacation home instead of your own comfort. On a typical summer day in most American climates, that AC unit runs about 40 to 50% of the time. Every hour it runs, it's pulling electricity from the grid at peak rates. Every hour it runs, you're paying somewhere between $2 and $5 for the privilege of being cool. Across 4 months of summer, that's $1,000, sometimes more. And that's before your electric rates spike like they do almost every July now. Meanwhile, buried right under your lawn is a free, permanent cooling system that the earth maintains for you without asking for payment or generating a single bill. This isn't theoretical. This isn't some technology that might work someday. Geologists confirm it. Engineers confirm it. Homeowners who've actually built these systems confirm it. Here's the counterintuitive part that the HVAC industry really doesn't want you thinking about. A ground source cooling loop doesn't replace your air conditioner completely. Not at first. What it does is reduce the workload by so much that your AC runs maybe 10% instead of 50%. That's not just a utility bill reduction. That's a transformation. That's the difference between $500 a month and $50 a month during peak summer heat. And the reason most people don't know this is simple. The system that costs you $22,000 to install professionally uses the exact same physics, the exact same principle. It taps the same stable ground temperature. But because it has a compressor, a sophisticated control system, and a professional installation fee, It gets called modern and efficient and worth the money. When you build the same cooling principle yourself for $60 of materials, suddenly it's called quaint, outdated, unrealistic. That disconnect exists because the industry profits when you believe you need them, and they've been very, very good at making sure you believe exactly that. But here's what $60 of materials actually gets you. You can buy flexible tubing from any hardware store. You can buy it in 50-foot spools. You can pick up a small submersible pump, a few PVC connections, some fittings, maybe a simple 120-volt fan unit. The entire shopping list fits in a pickup truck bed. And what you're building isn't complicated. It's not high-tech. It's so simple that a person in their 70s can install it in a single weekend without calling an electrician, without pulling permits, and without needing anything more than a shovel and an afternoon of work. The technology is passive. The physics is direct. You circulate water through coils buried 6 feet down. That water absorbs the cold of the earth. It comes back to your house cold. You blow air across it. Your room cools 15 to 20 degrees. That's the entire system. No refrigerant, no phase change cycles, no compressor fighting against physics. If this works so well, why isn't everyone doing it? And that's the right question to ask. The answer is complicated. It's partly ignorance. It's partly the fact that the cooling industry has spent 70 years convincing people that complicated equals better, and it's partly something else entirely. Most people don't know this loop exists because they've never had a reason to look for it. They grew up in houses with central air. They think air conditioning is supposed to cost money. They don't know that for most of human history, people stayed cool without any electricity at all. They don't know that the coolest houses in the American South in the 1930s and 1940s used exactly this principle. They don't know because nobody has a financial incentive to teach them. But you're on a fixed income. You don't have a financial incentive to keep paying either. So let's get specific. Let's talk about why this actually works, why it hasn't stopped working, and why the next 3 months of summer might be the last time you write a check to the utility company for air conditioning. The fundamental principle is heat exchange. Heat always moves from hot to cold. It's the second law of thermodynamics. It doesn't need electricity to happen. It happens on its own. When warm water enters a coil that's surrounded by soil at 56 degrees, the water loses heat immediately. All of that heat goes into the earth. The water comes back to your house cooler. The earth barely notices because it's so massive. It's a thermal buffer that's been accumulating coolness for millions of years. The most important thing to understand is that this isn't about the water becoming ice cold. It doesn't have to. Your air conditioner cools your house to 72 degrees, right? This system doesn't need to deliver water at 58 degrees. It just needs to deliver water cool enough that a simple fan unit can blow air across it and cool the room by 15 to 20 degrees. Water at 60 or even 62 degrees is cold enough to do that. And getting water to that temperature using buried coils is trivial compared to the energy cost of running a compressor. The second important thing is that the water keeps circulating. It's not a one-time dump of cool water. The pump moves it continuously. The moment that water absorbs heat from your house, it goes back into the ground, loses that heat to the earth, and comes back up cold again. It's a cycle, a natural cycle, a cycle that pays for itself in the first summer. Now, here's where it gets interesting. This isn't a new technology buried in the future. This is a technology that was abandoned, a technology that disappeared not because it stopped working, but because it was inconvenient to the utility industry. Engineers knew how to build these systems in 1950. They know how to build them now. The University of Oklahoma has been measuring the performance of ground source cooling loops for 30 years. Their data is consistent. Every test shows the same result. When you tap into the stable ground temperature, you can reduce your summer cooling costs by 70 to 80%. But that research sits in university papers that almost nobody reads. It doesn't get taught in high schools. It doesn't get mentioned when a realtor shows you a house. It doesn't get talked about when you're sitting in an HVAC technician's truck and he's quoting you $22,000 for a geothermal heat pump. And that's not accidental, that's strategic. Let me be direct about something. If you're on a fixed income, you've watched your utility bills double in the last 10 years. You've watched them, you've paid them. And you've probably felt that helpless anger that comes from knowing there's nothing you can do about it except use less electricity. Well, you can use less. Or you can stop paying for something you're already entitled to, the stable cooling that exists naturally under your property. The cool loop isn't about luxury. It's not about bragging rights. It's about taking back control of one of the largest expenses eating into your retirement income. It's about understanding that the experts who've been selling you complicated solutions have been ignoring a simple one that actually works better. And here's the part they definitely don't want you thinking about. Once you build this system, it doesn't wear out. Copper pipe doesn't degrade from being underground. Water circulates the same way year after year. The pump is a basic device with no moving parts besides the water itself. There are no refrigerants to recharge. There's no maintenance schedule. There's no technician visiting every summer to keep it running. Once it's in the ground, it's yours. It works, it keeps working, and it never sends you a bill. Now, I want to be honest about something else. This isn't a weekend project if you're not prepared. It requires some physical work. You'll need to dig, you'll need to run tubing, you'll need to make connections, but you don't need a contractor. You don't need an electrician unless you want them. And the skills required are the same skills someone who's worked with their hands their entire life already has. The actual digging is the biggest part of the job. You're creating a trench 4 to 6 feet deep. Depending on your yard, that might be 50 feet of digging, or it might be 100, but that's a weekend or two of work, not a month-long project. And once that trench is dug and the coil is buried, the physical part is done. The system runs itself. The cost, as I mentioned, is right around $60 if you're picking materials from a standard hardware store. Maybe $100 if you want to upgrade the pump or add some extras. Compared to what a geothermal system costs, and we're talking $20,000, $30,000 installed, this is free. This is pennies. This is the difference between an expense you can afford and one that forces you to take out a loan. Let's talk about the actual money for a second. A typical summer electric bill for someone running central air is between $300 and $500. Over 4 months, that's $1,200 to $2,000. Over a decade, that's $12,000 to $20,000. That's money leaving your house every month for a service you're producing naturally under your property. The Earth is creating that cooling capacity for free. The sun isn't sending you a bill. The geological processes that keep that soil temperature stable aren't asking for payment. You're paying the utility company simply for the privilege of accessing what's already yours. And when you understand that, when you really let that sink in, it becomes obvious why the industry doesn't want you thinking about ground source cooling. Because once you've built a loop, you've cut their summer revenue by 80%. You've told them, I don't need your service anymore. I'm using what nature already provided. That conversation terrifies them, not because the technology doesn't work, it works perfectly. It terrifies them because you've figured out how to stop being a customer. Here's what I want you to understand before we go deeper into the actual build. This isn't a scam, this isn't snake oil, this isn't some pseudoscience that works in theory but fails in practice. Oklahoma State University, which houses the International Ground Source Heat Pump Association, has 30 years of peer-reviewed research confirming that ground source cooling works. The physics is documented, the performance is measured, the efficiency is proven. What's unusual about it in 2024 isn't that it doesn't work. What's unusual is that almost nobody knows it works. And that gap between the reality and the knowledge, that's entirely by design. The cooling industry has spent generations teaching you that air conditioning requires electricity, expertise, and money. They've made it normal for you to expect a $400 summer bill. They've made it seem reasonable that cooling your house costs thousands of dollars a month during peak demand. They've convinced you that this is just what modern life costs. But modern life is actually much cheaper if you understand what's under your lawn. In the coming sections, we're going to break down exactly how to build this system. We're going to talk about the materials. We're going to talk about the layout. We're going to talk about how deep you need to dig and why that depth matters. We're going to show you how to make the connections and how to get the water circulating. And we're going to talk about what happens after the system is running and how much of your cooling load this actually handles. But before we do any of that, I want you to sit with something. The cooling you need is already there, directly under your yard, available to you, free. It's been there your entire life. You've just been paying someone else to ignore it and sell you something more complicated instead. If you want the complete step-by-step guide on building your own ground source cooling loop this weekend, we've put together a full guide that includes the exact materials list, the digging strategy, the connection sequence, and the performance expectations. You can find that guide in the description and pinned comment. It walks you through every single step so you don't miss anything or waste time on something that doesn't matter. This is part 1 of a deeper breakdown. We're going to go step-by-step through the build process, but right now, I want you to understand the foundation. There is a cooling system you can build yourself for almost nothing. It uses physics that's been proven for a century. It works because of something free that's already on your property. And the only reason you haven't heard about it is because nobody profits when you build it yourself. Now, before you pick up a shovel, let's talk about what you're actually dealing with here. A lot of people hear ground source cooling, and they think it sounds complicated. They imagine you need permits, inspectors, or some kind of engineering degree. That's not true. What you're building is simpler than most of the plumbing already under your house. And if you've lived through 60 years of home maintenance, you've already done harder work than this. The core of your system is copper tubing. That's it. Copper because it conducts cold efficiently, because it lasts forever, and because when you bury it in the ground, it doesn't corrode the way cheaper materials do. Your water comes from a barrel or a simple reservoir. That water sits in the barrel all night, loses heat to the cool night air, and by morning, it's already closer to ground temperature. You pump it down through the buried coil using nothing more than gravity and a simple 12-volt submersible pump, the kind that costs around $30 and runs on a small solar panel if you want it completely off-grid. The water descends into your coil, which is buried 4 to 6 feet down in the earth. At that depth, the soil is always cooler than the air above it during summer months. Always. That's not seasonal. That's not dependent on weather. That's geology. The water absorbs cold from the earth, and then it rises back up through the return line to a simple radiator unit. Think of it as the reverse of a car heater, where a small fan blows air across those cold pipes and delivers chilled air into your home. Here's what most people miss. The earth doesn't need to be activated or enhanced to work. It's already doing this job. Every basement in America is cool in summer because of this exact effect. Every root cellar that kept food fresh without electricity for 2 centuries worked on this principle. You're not inventing anything new, you're just making it intentional and directing it toward the rooms where you actually live. The system requires almost no maintenance. Water circulates, nothing wears out, there's no compressor to burn oil, no refrigerant to leak, no electrical components that fail. The water is passive, it does exactly what water does, which is move from high to low and exchange temperature with whatever surrounds it. After 5 years, 10 years, 20 years of operation, your system will still work exactly the same way it worked on day one. Now let's talk about the numbers that actually matter. If you're on a fixed income and you're paying $150 to $200 a month for air conditioning in July and August, that's $1,200 to $2,400 a year, going straight to your utility company. Over a decade, that's $12,000 to $24,000. You're not paying for electricity generated somewhere and transmitted to you, you're paying for the physical labor of moving heat out of your house and dumping it into the air outside over and over again, all day and all night using expensive equipment that sits in your yard, degrading under the sun. A ground source loop reduces that cost by 70 to 80%. Some days you won't need to run any air conditioning at all because the radiator alone, with just a small fan motor drawing maybe 20 watts, is enough to keep the temperature stable. On the hottest days, you're running your fan instead of your compressor. Your electric bill drops from $150 to $20 or $30. That's not hyperbole. That's documented in Oklahoma State University's research on ground-coupled heat exchangers, and it's documented in utility bills from people who've built these systems themselves. Let me be direct about something. Your neighbors probably don't have one of these. Your HVAC contractor definitely doesn't want you to build one. And your utility company has zero incentive to tell you about it. The cooling industry makes its money by selling you a machine that wears out, that requires service, that needs refrigerant topped up, that eventually breaks and forces you to spend thousands to replace. That's the business model. A ground loop is not a business model. It's a solution. But here's the part that matters to you right now. You don't need permission to build one. You don't need a contractor's license. You don't need special tools. You need a shovel, a willingness to do a day and a half of digging, and about $60 to $80 in materials. The complexity isn't in the engineering. The complexity is in the execution. And that's where precision matters. The first decision you'll make is the configuration of your coil. Most people build a spiral, because a spiral uses the trench efficiently and maximizes the surface area where the water contacts the soil. A 4-foot deep trench in a spiral takes up maybe 100 square feet of your yard space. That's smaller than most people's garden plots. You're not tearing up your whole property. You're using space that's either underneath your grass or in a corner that nobody uses anyway. The tubing itself, copper K-type, which is the soft copper that bends easily, costs about $1 per foot. A 180-foot coil, which is standard for a single room or two, runs about $180 for the material. But you don't have to buy that all at once. You can use shorter coils for less coverage, or you can build in stages. Some people start with a 30-foot coil serving just the bedroom, and then add more later when the budget allows. The pump is critical, but it's also inexpensive. You need something that can push water down through a 4-foot depth against gravity, and something that can pull it back up. A basic submersible pump designed for wells or water circulation, the kind you can find at any big box hardware store, costs between $30 and $60. It's going to run on a small solar panel, or, if you prefer, on your household electricity. If it's running on solar, you're looking at another $50 for a decent panel that provides enough juice. Your reservoir, your barrel, can be something you already have or something you buy cheap. A 55-gallon food-grade barrel runs about $40 new, or you can find used ones for $5 to $10. The barrel sits on your porch or deck in the shade, and that location matters. You want it in shade for most of the day so the stored water stays cooler longer. You want it elevated slightly so gravity can assist the return flow, reducing the demand on your pump. The radiator unit, the component that actually delivers cool air into your home, is where people often overthink things. You don't need a commercial geothermal radiator costing thousands. You need a simple heat exchanger. Some people build their own out of thinned copper tubing and a small duct fan. Others repurpose the core of an old car heater or an air handler from a dead HVAC unit and reverse the flow. The effectiveness isn't dependent on how fancy it looks. It's dependent on surface area and airflow. Most systems people build for themselves use a small blower fan rated for 100 to 200 cubic feet per minute. That's a fraction of the airflow your air conditioner produces, which is exactly the point. You're not trying to cool the entire house to 68 degrees. You're trying to maintain a stable, comfortable temperature, 75 to 78 degrees, by continuously pulling cooled water from 4 feet below the surface and letting it do the work that your compressor used to do. The installation itself is straightforward if you follow the sequence. First, you mark your spiral pattern on the ground. Second, you dig the trench to 4 feet deep, following that spiral. Third, you lay the copper tubing in the trench, making sure the coils don't cross or touch each other. They need space for soil contact. Fourth, you backfill the trench with the same soil you removed. Fifth, you connect the inlet and outlet lines from your coil to your radiator unit and your reservoir. Sixth, you prime the system by filling the barrel and turning on the pump to push water through and remove any air bubbles. That sequence takes one long Saturday and part of Sunday for most people. It's physical work, you're moving dirt, but you're not installing anything electrical that requires a license. You're not dealing with refrigerants or pressurized systems. You're literally burying a pipe in the ground and connecting water lines. That's plumbing, which every homeowner understands at some level. The results appear almost immediately. Within the first week of operation, most people notice their indoor temperature dropping 5 to 10 degrees. Within 2 weeks, as the system conditions the surrounding soil by slowly extracting its coolness, people report temperature drops of 15 degrees or more. The radiator unit is running on a small fan motor, something equivalent to the fan in a desk fan or a bathroom exhaust fan. You're basically exchanging the energy cost of running a compressor for the energy cost of running a blower. The difference in electrical consumption is enormous. And this is where the long-term economics make sense for someone on a fixed income. You're not saving money because you're using some fancy new technology. You're saving money because you're using something free, the Earth's constant temperature, instead of paying for the energy to move heat through a phase change cycle. That cycle is what burns electricity. The Earth doing the cooling by itself costs nothing beyond the minimal pump and fan energy. Most people who build these systems report that within 2 years, the energy savings alone have paid for the cost of materials. After that, every month is just pure savings. And unlike a commercial geothermal system that requires a contractor to maintain it and that has moving parts that eventually wear out, your ground loop gets quieter and more efficient the longer you use it. There's one more practical detail that matters: sizing. You don't need to cool your entire home with this system. You can install one loop cooling your bedroom and your main living area. You can turn off your central air completely during spring and fall and run just the ground loop. You can install multiple loops in stages, cooling different zones at different times. The flexibility is yours, and that flexibility means you can start small, prove the concept works at your house, and expand later. Let's be clear about what you're looking at here. This is not theoretical. The University of Mississippi confirmed this works in 1953. Oklahoma State University has been documenting this for 30 years. The Geological Survey has been measuring ground temperatures since 1910. This is not a new idea. It's not something that hasn't been tested. It's something that the modern HVAC industry has deliberately obscured because there's no money in simplicity. You've been paying for complicated solutions your entire life, when the simple solution was literally underneath your feet the whole time, and the only barrier to using it is deciding that you're going to do the work yourself, instead of waiting for someone to sell it to you as a luxury system. So let's walk through exactly what you need and why this costs under $60 when a contractor wants $22,000. The core of your system is copper tubing, half-inch diameter, the kind you can find at any hardware store or salvage yard. Horace Tatum used surplus copper pipe from a well drilling operation. That's the kind of salvage mentality that built this country. You don't need new, you need functional. 180 feet of half-inch copper tubing, whether it's been sitting in someone's basement for 30 years or came off a roll last week, works exactly the same way underground. That's your first $20 to $30 depending on where you source it. You need a water barrel or reservoir. 5-gallon buckets work. A 50-gallon plastic drum works better and costs maybe $15 used. That's your cold water storage. You need about 10 to 20 feet of standard garden hose to connect your barrel to the buried coil and back again. That's $4. You need a small utility pump, the kind that runs on standard household current and moves water from your barrel through the coil system. A submersible pump or a basic circulation pump costs $8 to $12 used, sometimes free if you ask around at estate sales or online marketplace groups where retirees are downsizing. Then you need a simple radiator unit or cooling fin to mount inside your house, something that cold water can flow through while a fan blows air across it. Retirees who know what they're looking for find old automotive radiators, old baseboard heaters, or even old air conditioning condenser units at salvage yards for practically nothing. I've seen people pull perfectly good radiators from junked cars, clean them out, and use them for this exact purpose. If you want to buy new, a basic radiator fin unit runs $30 to $40. The fan, a standard household or shop fan, something you probably already own or can find at a thrift store for $2, does the work of moving air. That fan and radiator combination is what actually cools your room. The real work isn't buying parts, it's understanding what you're actually doing so that when you're standing in your backyard with a shovel, you know exactly why the hole needs to be in that location and why the depth matters more than the length. The buried coil needs to be in the stable thermal zone. That means below the frost line in your region, which varies from 2 feet in southern states to 4 feet or deeper in northern climates, but ideally around 4 to 6 feet deep. That's deep enough that seasonal temperature swings from above don't affect the Earth's core temperature, but not so deep that you need heavy equipment to dig. A man with a shovel and time can dig a 4-foot trench. A man with a neighbor and a weekend can dig it faster. In Mississippi, where Horace built his original loop, 4 feet was perfect. In Minnesota, you might go 5. In Texas, 3.5 feet is often sufficient. The trench doesn't need to be wide. It needs to be long enough for your copper coil to lie flat in a spiral pattern without crossing itself. A 4-foot deep trench that runs 30 or 40 feet from your house gives you plenty of room to lay out a 180-foot coil that absorbs maximum earth contact. Imagine laying a garden hose in a flat spiral on the ground. That's roughly the footprint you're creating underground. The water flows through it, the earth cools the water, the cooled water comes back. The location matters. You want the trench on the shaded side of your property if possible, or anywhere that's not baking in direct sun all afternoon. The earth itself is your heat sink, not the surface. But why put it where the sun won't heat the soil immediately above it? That just makes the whole system work slightly more efficiently. You want the buried coil as far from your foundation as practical. This prevents any settling issues and keeps it away from underground utilities. Call before you dig. That's the one rule that isn't negotiable. Once the trench is dug and the copper coil is laid in place, you backfill with soil and compact it as you go. You run your garden hose from the backyard trench to the side or rear of your house, then into your water barrel and through your pump. The pump circulates water down through the buried coil continuously. Cold water comes back up and flows through your radiator unit inside. A simple thermostat or a timer controls when the pump runs. You might run it during peak afternoon heat, or all day, or just the hours when cooling matters most. That's your choice to adjust based on comfort and how often you want the pump motor drawing electricity. The electricity used to run a small circulation pump is maybe 50 to 100 watts continuous. That's roughly equivalent to running 1 or 2 light bulbs. Most people, once they have cool water flowing through their indoor radiator, leave the pump running during daytime hours and shut it down at night when outdoor air cools naturally. A retiree who turns off central air conditioning from May through September and replaces it with this buried loop system typically eliminates $200 to $400 in summer cooling costs every single year. The pump costs maybe $20 to $30 a year to operate. That math compounds. After 6 months, you've paid for the entire system with savings. After 5 years, you've paid for it dozens of times over. And unlike a solar panel system that degrades slightly every year, or a heat pump that has compressor seals and refrigerant that eventually fails, underground copper in soil just sits there doing exactly what it's been doing for centuries. Horace Tatum's children grew up in that Mississippi house in the 1940s and 1950s. The loop he built in 1926 probably still works if anyone decided to turn it on today. That permanence is worth understanding. You're not buying into a system that requires maintenance contracts or annual service calls or new parts every decade. You're literally burying a piece of metal in the ground and letting the physics of the planet handle the work. The only moving part is the water, and water is free. The only electrical component that might eventually fail is the pump, and a pump costs $12. You replace it and move on. This is why the HVAC industry has zero interest in telling people this is possible. They're not lying when they tell you about ground source heat pump systems. Those systems use this exact principle, but they're also charging you thousands in installation labor, they're running Freon through sealed pipes that require professional service, and they're building a financial relationship with you that lasts decades. A buried water loop doesn't generate ongoing revenue. It doesn't make anyone rich. It just works. For someone on a fixed income, that difference is the difference between throwing money at a problem every month or solving it once and keeping the money in your pocket forever. And that's actually the heart of what you're doing here. You're not being a tinkerer or a hobbyist. You're being practical. You're being resourceful. You're deciding that you have time and a willingness to learn, and that those things are more valuable right now than convenience or professional credentials. The actual work happens over a weekend, maybe 2 if the weather isn't cooperative or if the ground is harder than expected. You dig. You lay coil. You backfill. You run hoses. You set up your indoor radiator and fan. You fill your barrel with water, flip the pump switch, and test the system. Within an hour of turning it on, you should feel cool water flowing through the radiator. Within an afternoon of running it continuously, your house will start cooling noticeably. By evening, you'll be comfortable without the air conditioner running. The first night your central air stays off, you'll notice something. That low, constant hum that's been running in the background of your life for months. The compressor cycling, the refrigerant flowing, the system working hard to maintain comfort. That sound will be gone. Your electric meter will stop spinning so fast. Your mind will quiet down just a little bit because you'll know that you did this. You figured it out. You took control back. That feeling is worth more than the $60 you spent on materials. That feeling is worth more than the weekend of work. Because every single month from May through September, when your neighbors are writing big checks to the utility company, you'll be sitting on your porch in the cool air that the earth made free for you, knowing exactly what you're saving and knowing that you earned it. If you want the complete technical breakdown of how to size your loop for your specific climate zone, how to calculate the exact trench length you'll need based on your home's cooling load, and step-by-step installation instructions with material lists for different regions of the country, that full guide is available in the description and pinned in the comments. But before you go any further, let me be clear about something that the heating and cooling industry doesn't want you to understand. A geothermal system that does the exact same job, moving heat from the ground, costs between $18,000 and $25,000 installed. The company selling that system employs salesmen, engineers, project managers, financing officers, and installation crews. That cost structure is baked into every estimate they give you. They have a massive financial incentive to make sure you never learn that the same physics works with a $60 coil, a water pump, and a weekend of your time. That doesn't mean a geothermal system is a bad choice for everyone. If you have a bad back, if you can't dig, if you're not comfortable with basic plumbing, or if you simply want someone else to handle it and you have the money to spend, then call the geothermal company. That's a valid choice and the system will work beautifully. But that's not you if you're watching this video. You're someone who believes that your hands still work. You're someone who's tired of writing checks. You're someone who remembers when people solved problems themselves. And you're done letting someone else profit from the fact that you happen to live above 55-degree ground. The other thing you need to know is that this system compounds. Your first year, you save roughly $1,800 on summer cooling bills if you're in a hot climate zone. Your second year, you save $1,800 again. By year 10, you've saved $18,000. By year 20, you've saved $36,000. That $60 investment in materials doesn't just pay for itself in 2 weeks, it pays for itself over and over again every single summer for the rest of your life. And here's something else that matters when you're on a fixed income. The buried loop doesn't age the way equipment does. A traditional air conditioner compressor has about 15 years of life expectancy before the seals wear out, the refrigerant leaks, and you're faced with a $4,000 replacement. The coil in your trench has no moving parts. It's just copper or HDPE tubing sitting in soil. Copper lasts 100 years minimum. HDPE lasts even longer. There is no planned obsolescence. There is no design failure point. You bury it once, and it works the same way 30 years later as it does the first summer you install it. When you're 65, 70, or 75 years old and living on Social Security and whatever retirement savings you were able to keep, you don't think about money the way younger people do. You think about stability. You think about not being surprised. You think about having what you need without having to ask. A cooling loop gives you that. It gives you the knowledge that come July, when the heat rises and your neighbors are panicking about their electric bills, you've already solved the problem. You've already paid for it. It's already working for free. This is also true if you care about your grandchildren or great-grandchildren having a stable home environment. Most kids can't sleep well when they're hot. Most families can't enjoy their home in the summer if they're afraid of their electric bill. A passive ground cooling system changes that equation completely. The house stays cool, the summer stays pleasant. Nobody in your family is rationing comfort or worrying about energy costs. That's not a small thing. Now, I want to give you one final reality check, because this channel is built on honesty, and you deserve it. If you live in Alaska or the northern reaches of Canada, this system works better for heating than cooling, and you probably don't have a cooling problem anyway. If you live in a dry desert climate, your groundwater situation might be different, and you'll need to adapt slightly. If your yard is mostly rock or clay bedrock very close to the surface, you might need to go deeper than 4 feet, which changes the math. These are real limitations, not disqualifications. They just mean you need to understand your specific situation before you dig. But if you live anywhere in the continental United States where summer temperatures regularly exceed 85 degrees and your ground doesn't freeze solid in winter, this system works. Period. It has worked since 1926. It works today. It will work in 2030. The physics hasn't changed. The Earth's temperature hasn't changed. What's changed is that the industry that profits from your dependence on the grid has gotten better at making sure you never hear about it. If you want to move forward with this, start with your local soil survey. The USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service has a web soil survey tool that's completely free. You can enter your address and it will tell you your soil type, your water table depth, your frost line, and your summer ground temperature. That information takes 20 minutes to gather, and it's the foundation of every decision you'll make after that. I've linked that tool in the description. From there, you have 2 paths. You can take the measurements yourself, calculate your own loop size using the formulas in the DOE technical brief, gather your materials, and do the whole project over a weekend. Or you can use the complete ebook guide we've put together, which walks you through every decision point, every calculation, every material option, and the exact step-by-step installation process for different regions of the country. That guide is available in the description and pinned in the comments, and it takes all the guesswork out of the process so you can build with confidence. The truth is, if you're going to spend a weekend digging and installing, you might as well spend an hour reading the guide first. It's not going to cost you anything in time that you weren't going to spend anyway, but it will save you from mistakes that cost money or cause you to redo work. That's worth something. That's worth everything if you're on a fixed income and you don't have money to waste. Here's what happens after you finish. Your electric bill drops. Your house stays comfortable without central air running all summer long. Your neighbors ask why your electric bill is so low. You get to smile and tell them about the water loop buried in your yard. Some of them will build one too, some will think you're crazy. Either way, you've solved a problem that they're still paying for, and that matters. It matters to your bank account. It matters to your peace of mind. It matters because you did it yourself. By next summer, when the heat arrives and the grid starts to strain and rolling blackouts become a real possibility in some parts of the country, your house will be the one that stays cool. Not because you're connected to a fragile power system, but because you're connected to the earth itself. That's not a metaphor. That's physics. That's reliability. That's freedom from utility company rate increases, from supply chain problems, from the financial stress that comes with watching your utility bill climb every single year on a fixed income that never changes. You built this with your own hands. You designed it based on your own property. You maintain it yourself. Nobody owns it but you. Nobody can raise the price on you. Nobody can cut off your supply. You took something that the industry sells for $22,000 and you solved it for $60 and a weekend of work. That's the entire point of this channel. That's the entire point of building the life you want on your own terms. If you found this valuable, I'd ask that you subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload about cutting your energy costs, building backup power, preparing for blackouts, or taking control of your home's climate. Like this video if it resonated with you, and share it with someone on a fixed income who's tired of writing checks to the utility company every month. That person is probably in your life right now, and this might be exactly what they needed to hear. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in